This is a people issue, and Bishop Stephen frames the vision and strategy with Jesus standing up in the synagogue in Nazareth and quoting from Isaiah, Luke chapter 4, proclaiming the year of the Lord's favour, good news for the poor. And in a time of climate crisis, we're called to play our part locally in responding to that global crisis. It's also about planet, because we're deeply committed to creation care. We have a strong sense as Christians that we inherit the earth and the abundance of creation, which in turn is deeply threatened, and we want to play our part in living in a more sustainable way, and that touches our lives also in many ways, both locally and internationally. So it's both a people and a planet priority. I've mentioned our link with the Sudans, and we're conscious of that within this area of our mission commitment. And I think it's good to remember that the diocesan vision and strategy is a response to the national vision and strategy of the Church of England, and it's in the context of the Worldwide Anglican Communion. And the Worldwide Anglican Communion has its 5 marks of mission, one of which, the 5th one, is about the integrity of creation and our part in that. I think it's more than 30 years since that was identified as one of the 5 marks of mission, and it's a very serious challenge to everyone that we have moved so slowly in responding to the climate crisis. And for our communion, this has been part of our understanding of mission for 30 years, and here we are now talking about it. Sometimes it feels as though we've only just heard about it. So this is the time for action, undoubtedly. General Synod has many matters to consider, and notwithstanding what's been going on today and over this week, I think its attention to the climate crisis has been handled really very well. The resolution of the General Synod, an ambitious one to get us to net carbon zero by 2030, was a standout decision, some would say a little bit ahead of the curve perhaps, but I think suitably ambitious given the global challenge that we all face. And it's been my privilege to be part of the process that's responded to the General Synod resolution, and I've been on the working groups that devised the national roadmap for the Church, and I now serve on the grant-making body that is equipping dioceses and other institutions to respond collectively to the challenge of achieving net zero carbon by 2030. And I think for me, that's been a good experience, both to see how things nationally can work, and I think really well to have a joined up approach that means we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we can respond and learn with others about what it means to achieve net zero carbon together. I could say more about that perhaps later in the meeting, but I'm delighted that Dan Crook has stepped in to lead our diocesan response, and those of you who are part of Diocesan Synod would have seen the action plan which Dan brought to us and the Synod approved at its last meeting in October. And that is essentially a response to the national roadmap and the challenge from the General Synod. In a moment, I'm going to turn to Dan, and he's going to be the first of 4 people that we're going to hear from during this hour together. And after Dan and after the next 3 contributors, there's going to be a chance for a bit of conversation together, an opportunity to respond, because this is really about what each of us can do in our place. Whilst it's a global story, we're very committed to local action and very keen to encourage one another in the steps that we can take where we are. That's very encouraging. So over half the people here responding to that are saying we're already very involved. So I hope that we can hear from you and take heart from the work you're doing, and recognise that others are perhaps at an early stage or at least in discussion. That's an encouraging figure as well. It is being discussed. So thank you for that. Thanks, Will. Dan, over to you. what are some of the first steps that we can take at the local church level?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to just sort of spend a few minutes just focusing on the building aspect of it. So what could be done towards the sort of church building aspect? And one thing, the first thing I'm going to stress is that it's proportionate. We want a proportionate response that is linked to your specific situation. So for larger churches and those churches that are well used, net zero is likely going to take a little bit more to reach than those that are in a rural context or intermittently used. So I kind of want to highlight that, because I think that was part of the feedback that came back from Diocesan Synod, was that proportionality didn't quite come through. So we really want to link that net zero and your efforts there to the situation at the local level. And one thing we're certainly not suggesting is everyone goes out tomorrow and fits an air source heat pump and solar panels. That's not what we're suggesting at all. So just want you to hold that proportionality in mind. Something I want to cover as well is that there's something that can be done that everybody can do. So even if you are a smaller church that doesn't use a lot of energy, there's always something that can be done. And this is starting with the simple things, such as filling out the energy footprint tool, regularly recording your energy use, tracking that, and things like making sure your heating system is well maintained, regularly serviced, and that your heating controls are as up to date as they possibly can be, so that it's all nice and efficient. Other things can be how to consider how you use your energy within your church. Are there things that can be done to reduce it further, however small that is? Things like, being really keen to turn off lights when they're not in use, or considering, can you zone lighting areas so you're only switching on what you need rather than having to turn everything on all at once? Things, if your church is lit up externally, can you use this in more imaginative ways or reduce how long it's lit up? So there's always something that can be done there, which is, really good to kind of get into it and start kind of getting used to sort of the idea of reducing energy use and things like that. Starting the next stage is really to start with the basics of this kind of the fabric of the building. So net zero, everybody kind of thinks low carbon heating solutions, but actually it really starts with good maintenance. So regularly clearing gutters. Are the roofs watertight? Have you got any plants growing out the walls? We want to get rid of those. Is the pointing, is it concrete? Is it lime? Is it falling out of the wall? All those sorts of really unglamorous things we want to really tackle. Things that are quite important, we see quite a bit of, is the vents in windows. If the hoppers in the windows aren't working, then perhaps the ventilation of the building isn't going to work quite right. Do they windows need maintaining in themselves? So sometimes every so often they need to be re-leaded. They become a bit loose and a bit drafty. Equally, are there areas of damp that really need sorting? Because damp walls are really going to suck out any heat you put into that building. So any damp, all these kind of basic sort of things. Then we can move into things like, does the door fit well? Is it drafty? Are there things where we can start to sort of insulate things a bit better? And then sort of, how can the church building, how can the heating be as effective as possible? And when I think about that, I'm thinking about moving on to the relatively easy and cheap things first. I say relatively, because net zero's a journey. We don't start with the end. You don't read a book with the final chapter. You start at the beginning. So we're looking at things like insulating the people. So for instance, insulated pew cushions or carpet runners between pews, those things that make people feel a little bit more comfortable and less reliant on having to heat the building. We're thinking of things like replacing lighting with efficient LEDs, but also things like understanding how the system, how your heating system works. How long does it take to heat the building up? does it have to be on until the last person leaves, or can it be turned off? And does that heat stay in that building for a little while? So it's things like, how can that be optimized? And how you get to that is understanding how it works. We've all heard the adverts around the flow temperature of your boiler. So is your boiler set up right? One thing that a few sort of churches have considered is the kind of the hive heating thermostat, the remote thermostat, so they can really kind of control it really well. And the last thing that I just want to leave you with is to try and get people involved. So are there people in the local community that are passionate about the environment that can help the church on its journey to net zero? And really, I'd encourage every parish to really have an eco lead or an eco champion, somebody that can really push things forward and really kind of bring the environment and everything to the fore. So I'm going to leave it there, and hope that's kind of jogged a sort of few thoughts and a few points there.
That's fantastic, and really practical things. We wanted to root this conversation in really practical, achievable things. So I hope that's stirred your thinking a little bit. We're going to go into our breakout groups and really a chance to hear what you are already doing. How fantastic that over 50% of parishes are already on the front foot with this. What are you already doing, and why have you chosen those actions? Why are those actions important to you? And maybe as you hear other people's and you pick up on some of the things that Dan's been saying already, are there already thoughts in your mind about how you might respond further locally? David Bond, thank you very much for mentioning A Rocha. So at the heart of the national plan is a recognition that this is both about practical steps, but it's also about our wider understanding of mission and the hearts and minds really of people in their response, particularly in response to making Jesus known. Why and how is this inherent in our mission? And one of the great things that A Rocha offers us in our partnership with them is the Eco Church Award, which is a chance to both do practical things, but also to go on that journey of deeper faith understanding. And we're going to be turning to that in a moment. Here's some other great examples coming through.
Yeah, just picking up on the heating people and not the space. And I think net zero gives a good opportunity to just reassess and reevaluate how we heat, and that heating people directly as opposed to sort of space heating may not always be ideal for every church. We know that there's some that have historic fittings and fitments that kind of need a stable environment, and that's good. But it's a good opportunity to reassess what we've been doing for so long, because a lot of times we've inherited this kind of concept of we have to heat space in order to heat ourselves to be comfortable. So it's a good opportunity, net zeros, just to sit back, take a step back and go, is this really the best way of doing what we want? And is it the most efficient?
Fantastic. And I see Gay's talking about knitting blankets. At Darson Synod, we had the promotion of Take a Rug to Church as well, which can also be a good low-tech response to the winter. Fantastic. We're going to get some more data on Eco Church, I'm sure. I'll ask Dan just to dig up that figure from Lorna, that question there, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Those are great things, and I think some practical encouragements from those conversations. We're going to go a bit deeper now, and we're going to think a bit further about why is this challenge and opportunity inherent in making Jesus known, and where are our passions and our enthusiasms for next steps. And we're going to have three people speaking with us. We're going to hear from Jonathan, and then Lorna, and then Miriam. So we're going to go to Jonathan first. Well, Jonathan, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. How long have I got? 5 minutes?
5 minutes is yours, sir. Go ahead.
Right, I'll keep it short. On Saturday morning, I woke up in a police cell. I I'd expected to have been released from prison, from the police cell, and I went to see the desk sergeant, and he said, looking at your record, sir, these fines and suspended sentences don't seem to have been discouraging you. So I'm going to remand you in custody and you're going to go to court. So I got popped into the prison van, cuffed and by the Serco officer, popped into the prison van, popped into my tiny little cell within it, the tiny little window, and I was on my way to Westminster Court and got there just before 12. If we'd arrived after 12, I'd have had the whole weekend in police custody. And I thought, gosh, pushed this. Maybe I pushed this too far. Maybe I am going to prison this time, and I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared to do that. But I didn't want it to happen this week because I've got a number of commitments this week. And so I'm going to read you my statement of mitigation to the court. Fortunately, my judge was Muslim and understood I think the bigger picture and was merciful. But this is what I wrote. I regret the disruption I've caused to the court, to the police, to members of the public. I was involved in a Just Stop Oil slow march. I strongly believe in the rule of law and support the work of the police, who I know protect people. Several times in the past, when I was working at Pilsden Community, we had to call the police if we were in the middle, if there was potential for real violence. Every time they came and they protected people. So I'm very aware of their role. I now have a growing list of convictions, but all are out of my sense of conviction and concern for the future and the people of this country, the people of the world, and indeed all species of life on this beautiful planet. These convictions come from my sense that if we as a country don't radically change the way we live, we're in for a chaotic and deeply dystopian future. These thoughts of mine are backed up by science. Every COP conference, governments, delegates there tell us, the scientists tell us we must change. Over the last 30 years, I've known for 30 years about the effects of global warming. The oil companies have known for 40 years. Over the last 30 years, I've tried the usual challenge, petitions, lobbying my MP, marches. I live very simply. I live in a Franciscan community where we grow our own food. I personally put a lot of work into insulating buildings. We have an electric car. We run our heating system on biomass sourced from local logs. I've now, though, become convinced that the rapid change we need, and Sir David King, former chief scientific advisor to the government, in 2021 said this: what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the course of humanity. Yet our government, knowing the science, continues to issue new licenses to oil, gas, and coal companies. I think this is outrageous. As a Christian, I feel I cannot stand by and do nothing when millions already are being displaced and tens of thousands are dying because of the effects of climate change. What we're seeing in this country, we had the hottest the hottest summer on record once again. What we're seeing now is nothing to what people are seeing in places like Sudan. my protest is small and pitiful compared with these forces that are against us, walking down the road in the centre of this great city. But for my children and my grandchildren, and for the sake of everybody's children, I feel I have no option but to act, to protest, to act disruptively. I remember going to the Make Poverty History concert, some of you may have been there, gathering in Edinburgh in 2005. 750,000 people gathered there. There was no reporting on the mainstream media. And that's what's happening so often with the climate emergency. I think that in 30 years' time, people will say that the real criminals aren't people like me, but the chief executives and heads of oil companies and the heads of government that have promoted and promoted our dependence on fossil fuel. So that was my statement. And to say, really, I'm fortunate I can be involved in climate protest. I can afford to be arrested because my parents have both died, my children are grown and well set up. I live in a community that supports me. And I've got a fair amount of resilience, I think, personally. So I feel because I can, I have to do something. Just say theologically, walking into a protest can feel like a non-violent protest. By the way, the groups I'm involved with, Christian Climate Action, Just Stop Oil, all have a big emphasis on non-violence. You can't take part in an action unless you agree and have training in non-violence. Walking into an action such as a Just Stop Oil roadblock is like walking into the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You have to enter it in a sense of humility. You have to have a sense of, meekness. You have to have a sense of being part of the beloved community. And you certainly, you have to be a peacemaker. You have to take an awful lot of abuse. So, I would say, if you want to do one thing in terms of protest, join Christian Climate Action. And if you remember Christian Climate Action, you don't have to go to prison, you don't have to get arrested. You can go on pilgrimage, you can be part of prayer vigil. I've done all those things. You can do some lobbying, you can pray with other people deeply concerned about the climate emergency and be inspired by others. The Christian Climate Action chat is an amazing resource for all kinds of things to do with responding to the climate emergency. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, thank you so much. And
by the way, the judge was merciful. I must finish the story. And £350 fine, which was a lot preferable to being locked up, or I thought it would be £1,000. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that story, and what a compelling testimony. We salute you as a prophet in our midst, and I think many of us can take actions that are not necessarily going to lead to being arrested, but are practical things that we can do to add our voice, whether that's through different advocacy organisations or simply for actually standing for the truth in our own community. So thank you for your encouragement and inspiration, Jonathan. We're going to turn to Lorna.
Good afternoon. I want to contribute to this discussion this afternoon by suggesting some ways working with children and young people can help our goal of climate justice and care for creation. How their vision, their enthusiasm, their open-hearted engagement can perhaps change hearts and minds and push this vital goal of ours up the agenda, just as Jonathan and his fellows are trying to do so bravely. So first, I wanted to share about our experiences in a Growing Faith Sherborne and Shaftesbury Young Leaders Project, and suggest if we start by asking young people what change they think needs to happen, then this leads to a whole catalyst of bold actions. They can sort of be the leaders. So I'm just going to share my screen. There. So our consultation there discovered climate justice was among children and young people's top priorities, alongside cost of living worries and them needing safe places and more support for their well-being. And using the approach of leaders coming from the local church and the school and some community partners to support the young people to turn their ideas into action, a project has emerged that they want to take forward. And that will be an historic first in Sherborne. All the schools, the primary schools, the senior school, the public schools, the school that helps children who struggle to engage, all coming together to do a clothes swap project. They will invite the whole town into this. It highlights the significant issue of fast fashion going into landfill that they feel passionate about, but it also offers local families affordable uniform and fashion available in Sherborne. So it helps more than one action. It shows them that helping go net zero and care for creation also helps people, just as we were talked about right at the beginning of this, that it's about people too. And they are partnering with a Dorset sustainability champion who runs repair cafes. And they will be offering a repair service. And they have discovered what they call nanotechnology. Do it like your nana did it. That actually sewing is brilliant, and but they've got their own twist on it. You can see on that jumper there, they sort of repair it in a way that's unique, and also they absolutely love sewing machines. I think we discovered that sewing machines is a big bit of machinery that can go very fast, so it's quite exciting to use. So they're enjoying doing repairs. So they're having fun. And while they're doing all this good work, they're thinking, along with the church volunteers, what this means about their vocation, their gifts, serving the world in this way. What does that mean? What did Jesus say about that? So it's also making Jesus known in a really invitational way. Also, we're finding that these children as leaders, their open-hearted enthusiasm and boldness, it's infectious, and it attracts a lot of offers for help, more help than we know what to do with right now, which is a wonderful problem to have. It creates great partnerships, teams of church volunteers, so it increases your volunteer capacity. And young people who team up with young at heart adults who also have budgets, skills and knowledge, that's quite a dynamic combination. And Sherborne, being a very go-ahead town with town council and mayor, they're supporting these children and young people to put more of their ideas into action by supporting them form a youth council with all those schools sending reps and giving them a 5,000 annual budget. So more of this action can get going. In Shaftesbury, and the local rector who helped put on what we call a dream scheme, it was a dream scheme pilot. She's described working with young people in this way as Wi-Fi and booster into community partnerships who are working in this care for creation sphere. And one of the fruits, just as an example, is there's this brilliant project. There's Planet Shaftesbury in Shaftesbury. They've got an umbrella organisation with all these amazing eco projects. One of them is the community allotment. It's in walking distance of an estate that's got some pockets of real deprivation within it. The church helped run a summer club, which meant that young people and their families got to join in with the community allotment, which is a really realistic way of families learning how to grow their own veg and taking away big bags of local vegetables, again, helping the cost of living crisis. Unless you've got part-time job type of free time, you can't run your own allotment. But this way, all those local families can engage regularly with a community allotment. So the community allotment was delighted to have more children and young people, and it really helped the families. Another aspect to share is the while the messy church, the messy church goes wild aspect. I was talking with some colleagues in the breakout room. There's lots of brilliant practice in the diocese on wild churches, muddy churches. Bridport, we've just started, and we think in the church that it started in St Swithin's, there's not enough volunteer capacity to start an eco church, they feel. But the young people surveyed what was in the churchyard, all the amazing flora and fauna, with some adult botanists and naturalists in sister churches, and through that they are just so it attracts volunteers, young volunteers and families. If you do a bug hunt, we're hoping that there's a young set of young leaders will form, take that work forward, and they will kickstart the eco church in that congregation. That's why I asked the question about how many eco churches have we got. If we haven't got enough, which perhaps we haven't, then perhaps the young people can help support that amazing, valuable work that's going on by La Rocha. So this is just a taster of how perhaps young people's boldness, their enthusiasm, can be a catalyst and help build partnerships. And I think that's a really good time to perhaps hand over to the next film, because this is Miriam, who's 13, who comes to Wild and Messy Church. Hi, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Miriam. I live in Bridport and I'm the eldest of 3 siblings.
Could you tell us what you're doing in the space of helping the environment?
It all started in my primary school when my school had the idea to become one of those eco schools and start making an impact on the world. And now in secondary school we're starting to make a small climate change film on how our actions are impacting the earth, and we'll be going around to different schools, students, adults, teachers, asking them what they think about the environment and what we could do to stop it.
Brilliant. And are you doing anything at church about this?
In my church, I go to St Mary's, and last year they planted a Christmas tree, a real tree, and we got some lard and bird seeds and made them into ornament balls and hung them on the tree. And another church I go to is called St Swithin's, and they do Messy Church there. And last time they did an experiment on how rain comes down, like the clouds, and how it might affect the environment.
Okay, so it might disrupt it. So, and also you helped me preach, didn't you, at Harvest? Do you remember that?
Yes. It was in John.
Yep.
About how Jesus and his disciples had to feed 5,000 people from just 2 barley loaves and I think a couple fish from a small boy. And how Alana asked me if, when there were 2 disciples, Andrew and Philip. Philip only saw the bad side of things, wasn't it?
Yeah, all the blocks, was
All
really
the
worried,
blocks.
wasn't he?
And
Yeah.
he was worried on how they would feed 5,000 people. But Andrew kept going and his faith kept him strong. And Andrew tried to come up with solutions. And in the end, Jesus prayed and they all got the food. And they ended up having 12 baskets of scraps.
Brilliant. And I think Annie and I we thought we were like Philip, weren't we? We were really worried that we were not going to find the answers to this, and you felt different, didn't you?
Lorna asked me if young people thought the same way Philip did, and I said no, we think like Philip and Andrew, and that we only see the solution to things and find a way to fix the negative.
Brilliant. And could I ask you why is all of this important? You're doing a lot of work. Why is it important to you?
Because it might not seem like a big thing now, but all little children, babies, great-grandchildren, all of them, they will be inheriting the earth after this. And by the time they get the earth, it's probably going to be polluted, trashed, all messed up and things. And right now, it doesn't seem that bad, so we can still try and make an impact and try to change things. So all the younger ones don't end up coming into a world where there's nothing much to see anymore.
Brilliant. And how does your faith help you with this?
Well, I believe that my faith has kept me strong and from going down and saying, oh, I can't do this, oh, people aren't listening to me, I should just give up. My faith has kept me strong this entire time, helping me persevere through things, helping me keep strong and keep on doing what I'm doing right now.
Brilliant. So is there anything else you want to add, Miriam?
Be careful of your actions. You never know, a small thing can make a big impact on the world.
Thank you very much.
Lorna, thank you. And thanks by extension to Miriam. I think we've heard about Andrew and Philip, and maybe Miriam needs to feature in that story as well. A bit like Philip, perhaps there are some barriers, some things that are holding us back. And as we step into the next stage of the vision and strategy, it's quite good to name some of those. What are some of the things that perhaps present a challenge? Conscious at the start of our webinar, people were saying maybe we haven't got going yet. Are there particular barriers that it would be helpful to name together, that we should be working on together to try and tackle, to help progress and stay with this sense of energy and enthusiasm that's coming from all around us to step into these opportunities? Wonder if people would like to say anything about that, or indeed if there are other comments people would like to make in light of what you've heard from Jonathan, Lorna and Miriam. I'm going to throw the meeting open. Also take your attention to the chat. Huge thanks to Mike for sharing a couple of links from A Rocha. Our partnership with A Rocha, absolutely central to developing this strategy and taking forward engagement across our parishes. So I highly commend what A Rocha is offering to us. Going to throw the floor open. People like to maybe raise some of those barriers that we should name together, or just share any further thoughts and reflections at this stage in light of what you've heard.
My point of view, from experience of coming alongside churches, we can often get a bit stuck. I think we know that the Bronze Award is relatively easy to do, but it's then just often connecting with other churches, and we're very keen for, we have now a number of gold and a number of silver churches, that if you can offer your experience to churches around to build up that community aspect, that can really help. And finding out what else is going on. I've put in the chat also about we have a sort of national community called Wild Christian, which just gives ideas and thoughts. And I guess the other thing, from an A Rocha perspective, we take climate change really seriously, but our main focus is actually on just the loss of species we're getting. We're in a biodiversity crisis at the moment, and finding ways that we can just increase the diversity and wonder of the world. In actual fact, if we can care for biodiversity, it's going to have a real impact on the climate change too.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please jump right in.
Yeah. To me, the church is more than the church building. It's the people. And I think it was Lorna, was it? The last speaker, Miriam. I mean, and taking it out into the community is just so important. But it's also vicarages as well. And I just wonder how much the church is doing to ensure that vicarages become carbon neutral. And it's about how we sell this to the people in the pews. We've got to make it wider. And it was good to hear Lorna what she's doing. And also Jonathan, of course.
Let me just speak on the vicarages point. Dan, I'm sure we'll have things to say about that. I think in terms of our collective footprint as a diocese, we're really conscious that it's actually each of us as individuals, maybe as member of churches or communities around our churches, where the real footprint is. But clearly we want to pay attention to that created by the activities of us as the church as well. And at the forefront of that are those buildings that we heat regularly, and that includes vicarages. So we are part of an ongoing process of transition for those houses, and there's shared learning nationally to make sure we identify the best next steps on that. And we've started to identify some learning in the diocese. We've installed 4 air source heat pumps in the last couple of years to learn from that experience, and mapping that forward understanding what technologies will be appropriate in which buildings is going to be a significant step. Dan, do you want to say anything more about vicarages?
Yeah, it is part of the Darsters Action Plan, and the carbon emissions from vicarages are in scope as to what is counted as net zero to 2030. I know Derek is working on, when he goes around for his inspections, working on a plan that can categorise vicarages and come up with a maintenance plan. So when maintenance is due, we're making the right decisions towards net zero when things are due. So we're not simply just pulling on the like for like replacement strings, but that work is definitely ongoing.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question that slightly follows on from the previous comment? Can the diocese and the DAC help churches, most of which have, or certainly a lot of which have, a large south-facing roof, to make use of that for solar panels? And also, I think a number of rectories are on a similar sort of alignment. So we've got a big area of roof space across the whole of the diocese. And I wonder if there are imaginative ways of making use of that, not only for sort of church heating, but also maybe for some income coming from electric vehicle charging points.
Yeah, Tim, I've replied to your message. It's certainly worth exploring, and we've got a number of churches that have installed solar panels, and the Church Heritage Record has a sort of map that you can see where these churches are. I know the DAC is certainly encouraging of it. I won't go into all the different facets, but there are different things to consider in that, and certainly planning permission is one of them, and we do encourage early dialogue with the local planning authority. But do feel free to pop me an email, or if anybody's thinking of utilising the south roof of the church, do pop me an email at dac@salisbury.anglican.org, and we can go through in a bit more depth those sorts of considerations that you'd need to take.
We're going to go to Julian for the last comment, and then we're going to draw things to a close. Julian.
Thanks. I'm just following on from that. I mean, it strikes me that along with all the other demands on parishioners and finances of the diocese as well, it would be so good if the kind of front loading of those kind of projects could be adopted. Perhaps maybe there is a fund from the central church for such things, so that actually, yeah, it may cost you £20,000 now, but if you set that against the costs that it was going to be, you'd be having to find, but you can't find £20,000 now, but over 10 years you could. That kind of way of thinking and more, collectively purchasing things like that. I hope that's coming.
It is. There are investments being made in exemplar projects in demonstrator churches, an opportunity to bid for some of that funding. And there's also going to be some shared learning that we can access. And I think as we step into those opportunities, the more we can do collectively and not reinvent the wheel will be indeed very, very good. And we know that this is going to be a massive challenge for everyone. It is now, and over the next 5-10 years, that challenge is only going to accelerate as we need to respond better and quicker. And so I think it's good that we're working collectively on that.